Hi, this is Bill Seaback, and this is part 3 of your interview prep for your upcoming interview with one of our very interesting clients. I think it's important for us to just backtrack a moment and talk a little bit more about your posture for the interview, what you should be doing to prepare for the interview, and what you need to bring to the interview with you. I really encourage you to do as much online searching on the company as it's possible for you to do. At the very minimum, you should be studying the company's website and understand how they represent themselves in the marketplace, in the competitive landscape, and look for tiny clues. You know, a lot of times communications companies will list the names of their employees, put photos in there, their backgrounds, study those. You get a sense for the kinds of backgrounds that are important to that particular organization. They talk about the jobs that they've been successful with, the client relationships that they have. So these are all really important things. I also think you ought to Google the company, and you also ought to Zoom the company, www.zoom.com, Z-O-O-M, and try to find as much information as you can. Especially you can Google the person who you're going to be meeting with and see if there's any relevant articles out on the web that pertain to this individual, this particular company, and may shed some light on developments, business developments that they have that might affect in a positive way or a negative way of the role that you're interviewing for. I just want to touch base and remind you that while this is a selling situation, it's not an overselling situation. You've been headhunted and been presented to this organization as a candidate who I think can do an excellent job for this company. So it's vitally important that you have the right posture, and you know, we've talked about your needs, your requirements. So in a general way, with our clients, they have an idea of where you're at. They understand why you've responded to the role that we discussed, and so I just want to make sure that your posture is relaxed, that you're there on a fact-finding mission. And if it makes sense to move forward at the end of the process with the employer, you'll be very well prepared to do so. And if you decide that it's not right for you for whatever reason, obviously there's not going to be any pressure from us, and we'll relay that information to the client. In part 2 of the interview prep, called the handshake, I talked briefly about the first 3 or 4 questions. I thought what I'd do in this part of the interview prep is actually give you the 8 or 10 or 12 questions that I think are going to be really important for you to have answered during your first interview. I think it's critical that you write these things down in a notebook. You take the notebook in with you. And what that does for you is it allows you to focus on the really important part of the dialogue, which is the employer's answers to your questions. If you're fumbling around in your mind's eye about what to ask, when, and how to ask it, you're going to lose out on the most important kernels of information that are going to allow you to make a decision as to whether or not you can do the job. It's a job you want to do, and if these are the people you want to do it with. So if you have the questions written down, you can take them in with a notebook, and you can use that as a reference guide to ask the questions specifically so that you can focus on the employer's answer. Absolutely critical. And in interviews when you're going to meet with more than one person, I would highly recommend that you ask the same questions of everybody you meet so that you can compare and contrast the answers, and hopefully there'll be some consistency throughout the organization, especially when it comes to role definition, expectations, why people join the organization, and answering the question, you know, why this company, why now in its company history. So obviously I'll just go right through a quick list, and you can write these down and take a few moments to get familiar with them, but do take the notebook in and use that as a guide for you. Obviously the first question that we want to ask the employer is to define the specific opportunity. We want them to, secondly, then we want them to define their expectations of success in the role. The third thing that we want is an understanding of how that company will then identify, measure, and reward that successful performance. If they don't have a system in place to identify and measure and reward success, why would you want to go work there? Companies that say, hey, we're going to do an employee evaluation at 6 months or 12 months or 18 months and then never get around to it, those are companies that we want to avoid, because obviously, especially if you're achieving the objectives but you're not being rewarded for that work, then why would you want to go work there? The fourth question, tell me about the culture of your company. I know it sounds like a vague question, but especially when you're meeting with 2 or 3 or 4 individuals in the organization, you're going to get different views of the corporate culture, and that's going to be something that's a very internal evaluation that you are going to do, and then you and I will do together to help round out that picture. But you'll get a sense, is your personality and the way you like to work going to be a good fit for this organization. The fifth question is, how do you differentiate the company among your competitors? And certainly with the ever-changing landscapes in medical education and educational promotion, if this organization does not have a good answer in terms of how they portray themselves in the competitive landscape, we need to turn and run very quickly. The sixth question is, why is this a fun place to work? If it's not fun, why go work there? Obviously, it can't be like going to a stand-up comedy show every minute of the day, but there ought to be some people walking around the office that have a smile on their face. There ought to be people who have look of relaxed enjoyment of what they're doing, and there ought to be some personality flowing through the operation that you should be able to pick up on. Because if it's not a fun place to work, you're spending so many hours there every week. We all know this business is a difficult business, and a lot of times we can't get it done in 40 hours. So if you're going to spend so much time there, there's got to be points to have fun and enjoy that place. And if they can't answer that, then obviously we've got to evaluate that on the merit of the answer. The seventh question: tell me about how work and projects flow through the organization. Number 8, getting a grip on the person's management style and their philosophy of mentoring and developing employees, absolutely critical. The ninth question: as you know, most medical communications companies work their employees, to extremes. How do you prevent that, and what resources are brought to bear on solving clients' needs? Hey, if the client calls up at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon and they want some changes, and I've got to work Saturday and Sunday, what's going to happen to me? Do I get some comp time for that extra effort, or is that just sort of par for the course, and nobody ever acknowledges the fact that I gave up my weekend so that we could solve a client problem? Question number 10: what are the accomplishments of the company are you most proud of? Question number 11: what attracted you to the organization, and why do you stay? Question number 12: what's the current vision of the business over the next 2 to 5 years? This is really important to understand that the company is thinking about the future of the business, about the future growth of the organization, and as a result of that, there obviously has to be some training, mentoring, and developing of employees to take the company from where it's at to meet a vision that might be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road. Now, the other thing about why do you stay? This is a really important question to ask all of the people that you meet in the organization. And a corollary to that question that I like to have candidates ask is this: look, the company that was presented to you during the interview process, was that in fact the actual company that you joined, and was it consistently the case as you got more entrenched in the organization? A lot of times companies are very good at interviewing and representing the facts, so to speak, in a certain way, and then you get into a role and you start to assimilate into an organization, and you realize that this company wasn't anything at all like how they portrayed it during the interview process. It's kind of like dating. You meet some nice person out of the club on a Friday, you see him again Saturday, and Sunday you're proposing marriage, and you don't want to find out all the bad stuff that was hidden on the honeymoon. You want to find all that stuff out on the front end. And a lot of people are really good at sort of covering up where the bones are buried, where the skeletons are, and all the blemishes. But the reality is that every company is made up of people. We all have blemishes, therefore every company has blemishes. All we really want to try to do is say, look, what are the blemishes? What are the problems that I'm going to have to deal with? Let's get them out on the table. Let's talk through them, and let me make a fully informed decision as to whether or not I want to work here. Again, write these questions down in your notebook, take them in with you to your interview, and ask those questions, and make sure you get the ability to focus on the answers that the employer is going to give you.